in population. And here's a map, here's a chart. It's a good one, isn't it? This is just in central Mexico, and there you see the Indian population falling from 8 million in 1540 to about 1 million in 1610, and it would probably double that in 1520. And here you see what happens to the cattle, sheep and goats. Right, so the people die and the cattle, sheep and goats come in. So that's turning it into a valuable possession. Well, I now want to look at Spanish conquest and rule. Now, I must add, this is extremely fast, right? If we're in the United States, we'd spend a whole semester just doing this. So this is a very brief introduction to the topic. The precedent for Spanish conquest of new country was the southward expansion of Spain itself. This is known as the Reconquista, and was at the expense of the Arabs. The most sophisticated Arab state in the early 15th century was actually in Spain, Granada. That was the intellectual heartland of the Arab world. And it was conquered progressively, and Granada fell in 1492, coincidentally the same year that Columbus sailed across the Atlantic and annexed the first of the Caribbean islands, which was Santo Domingo. The critical event, of course, was the conquest of Mexico by Hernán Cortés in 1520-21. Now, I've got a picture of Hernán Cortés somewhere. Where's he gone? Hernán Cortés, Men in Tights. He's disappeared. Somebody's nicked it, or I've lost it. Oh well, doesn't matter. Here he is. Here's Cortés. Well, that's not much use, is it? We'll forget about that. Anyway, you get the idea. Cortés conquered Mexico extraordinarily rapidly with a very small force of a few hundred men. How did he conquer the Aztec Empire so quickly? Well, I think the answer is that he had a lot of Indian allies, and there was good reason for him to have Indian allies, because Aztec society was extremely violent. It was probably the most violent society on earth. The Aztec Empire was based on conquest of neighbouring peoples. Aztec religion was based on the propitiation of gods by human sacrifice. And they wanted their human sacrifices to be good ones. That meant lots of young men, right? The best specimens of humanity in Aztec view. Maybe some of you guys have that opinion too. So it was all dependent on conquering neighbouring tribes and imposing a levy of young men to be brought to the capital, which was called Tenochtitlan. And when they were brought to Tenochtitlan, they were drugged. And the Aztecs had good drugs. They had marijuana and they had mescaline, which is the raw ingredient of LSD and comes from a cactus plant. So they did drug them, which was a little bit humane. Remember, they smoked. In America, they smoked, which they didn't do in Europe until Europeans went to America. So they gave them marijuana and mescaline. Then they took them up the steps of the pyramid. And when they got to the top, the priests were there, and the priests didn't wash, and they didn't cut their hair, and they would get a dagger and cut the heart out of the victim and then hold it up to the sun with blood and gore dripping all over their bodies. Now you can see why the Requerimento, demanding that they convert to Catholicism, didn't look so bad. Right? It was a lot better than human sacrifice. What do you mean? All we've got to do is go to church once a week? It wasn't too bad at all by comparison. Not only, and when we go to church, we get free bread. Not much. Conversion to Catholicism didn't look so bad. The Spaniards had a lot of allies among the various tribes conquered by the Aztecs. Here's a picture of all this going on, and it's quite a bloodthirsty picture. I know you probably Yeah, that's pretty clear, isn't it? You can see dismembered bodies all over the place, people being chopped up. And you can see both Spaniards and American Indians attacking this Aztec town. So the Spaniards quite soon established alliances with Indians because, basically because the Aztecs' neighbours hated them so much. A house divided cannot stand. Much the same thing happened in South America when Francisco Pizarro conquered the Inca Empire in 1533. Now, the way the Spanish ran their empire was the so-called encomienda system. Encomienda means commendation. The natives were commended to the Spanish lesser aristocrats who came over to make a fortune in America. So they migrated, and they were given a whole lot of Indians and land, and they were obliged to employ the Indians, give them work, give them money, and convert them. Now, some people thought that this was little better than slavery. And one man who thought that was Bartholomew de las Casas, who was a bishop, and he wrote a book which was called The Mirror of the Spanish Tyranny Perpetuated in the West Indies. One will see here a cruelty more than inhuman committed by the Spaniards, as well as a description of these countries, peoples and their characteristics. Illuminated by the Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas of the Order of St. Benedict, newly reprinted with engravings. Now notice this is printed in Amsterdam. You see down here, it's a French language edition, that's French, but this is Dutch. Okay, it's printed in Amsterdam. Centre of Protestantism. Right, so it's anti-Catholic propaganda, but for distribution in France. And we can see here various pictures. These pictures in the corners are pictures of Indians being murdered in various ways. And here you see Spanish aristocrats looking very pleased with the whole business. So that's a cover of a 1620 edition of Las Casas, the originator of this black legend, as it's so called, the black legend of Spanish cruelty towards the Indians. Now, the political structures were viceroyalities, New Spain or Mexico, and New Castile in South America, and the audiencias, which were the forerunners of the modern states. And there they are. I've already explained that to you. You can see them all on there. It gradually became more decentralised as time passed. So that's a little bit on Spain. Now I want to look at France, the Netherlands and Britain in America, and now we're talking about North America, the modern United States and Canada. Among the British colonies there was great diversity. They were established for different reasons. Virginia and the Carolinas were established as colonies for profit. In particular, profit cultivating tobacco and cotton. Cotton previously came from Egypt primarily. Tobacco, of course, was unknown. It was a new commodity. And it was a very lucrative business. It's in this period, as Europe expands around the world, that we get a lot of the things that we take for granted as part of life that weren't part of European culture beforehand. Tea, coffee, tobacco. Unknown in Europe before the 16th century. So Virginia and the Carolinas, they were plantations for making money. Massachusetts was a refuge for Puritans who felt themselves religiously persecuted in England, and so went to Massachusetts where they could be more free. And they had primarily religious motives, although they wanted to make money too. Now let me find my little thing about what the first Pilgrim Fathers did when they got to Massachusetts, because this is really interesting. They gave praise to the Lord. Now, I've got this somewhere. Here it is. So,